Check. Thank you, thank you. Yes, my presentation is called Closing the Programmatic Loop, but I think after today's themes, I probably should have chosen something like Programmatic Analytics 2.0 or something of the like 3.0, whatever. But here we are. So again, thanks for having me to speak over your lunch. You know, people joke about data being the new oil. Maybe it's the new food for programmatic buyers, I don't know, but we'll just jump right into it. So if you don't know who Datorama is, we're a marketing intelligence company. We actually recently got acquired by Salesforce just about a year ago, and it was an acquisition to actually solve the exact challenges that you guys probably experience here every single day, which is bringing together all of your different disparate media buying platforms, ad servers, viewability vendors. I've heard a lot of tech mentioned earlier today. Our goal is essentially to bring it all together, right, and make sure that you guys are being insights-driven, data-informed as you're optimizing on these campaigns. So before I jump in, just have to quickly throw out there, Salesforce is a publicly traded company, so please base all of your purchasing decisions based off of currently available products. Okay, so now that I have that out of the way, let's start by talking about the landscape. So I think it's no secret that programmatic is at its peak, if not, you know, heavily accelerating here. I think the situation today is that it's an industry that's incredibly evolved. Some of the speakers from earlier today talked about having more reach to different devices, more and more ad formats, et cetera, et cetera. But with all of that evolution comes more convolution, right? And that's really kind of the themes of what I'm going to be talking about today. I wanted to talk a little bit about how some of these trends actually do introduce more complication and how ultimately that actually creates insights, or I should say the lack of insights, a lot more prevalent. And you know, knowing that we're all here in the media space, we want to be able to deliver insights, not just receipts on how campaigns are performing, but actually tie that to growth. That's what we're going to be talking about today, and how I think marketing intelligence is a way of solving that. So first things first, right? So according to eMarketer, 84.9% of all digital display is moving towards programmatic. Another quick statistic, a lot of that is going towards mobile, right, versus desktop. And then finally, a lot of it is going towards video. So what's the point here, right? We're able to reach people in more places before. Programmatic's great because it's omni-channel. You can reach people pretty much everywhere, and it's super customer-centric in terms of your targeting. But with more and more places to be able to do that, there's less transparency, right, around how performance actually works. It becomes harder to actually prove out your ROI. And so, you know, that brings us really to the first challenge. I just mentioned it, transparency, right? The reality and, you know, I think the beauty of real-time buying is that you can make these super fast, you know, in-campaign optimizations. You're able to do a lot more customer-centric targeting, you know, better addressable audiences, et cetera, but the reality is most people don't know where their placements and media buys are going. They don't, right? And they don't know what the performance looks like. They don't always know where their ads are ultimately landing, and therefore that creates frustration. And one of the gentlemen speaking earlier today talked about how it's not always just about impressions and clicks, right? It's about the end outcome, right? And being able to actually tie your media towards that. How do you do that when everything is so disparate? Quick stat is that I think 71% of all media buyers, their number one stickler with their vendors is that there's not enough transparency, right? And so without being able to actually see how every single placement is going between all of your vendors, you'll never truly realize the full power of programmatic. Second problem, brand safety. So another a beautiful piece about programmatic is the fact that you're able to serve ads to multiple places that you didn't know you could do that before, right? New channels, new sites, new publishers, but the reality is you cede a lot of that control. You're no longer transacting with publishers on a one-to-one basis, and therefore, you know, there's a lot of risk. If you don't put the right parameters down in place, you risk putting your ads in a non-brand safe contextual environment, right? So here's the compromise, right? How do we balance the efficacy and the scale while also making sure that we're staying true to our brands? And then finally, accountability, right? So when it comes to accountability, I mean, the problems from the turn of the 21st century are still kind of pertaining with us today. John Wanamaker, if you're not familiar with who he was a really big advertising mogul. And one of his quotes was, "Half the money I spent on advertising was wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half." And so, you know, in recent times, we've implemented things like viewability, right? Making sure that real people are actually seeing the ads. We've also tried to get more advanced with retargeting, right? And making sure that from a consumption perspective, advertising is a connected experience, right? But again, with how programmatic's evolved, more and more channels, more and more platforms, more and more audiences and nuances, that brings about a lot of disparate data silos, essentially, right? And so without being able to bring all of these things together, it's hard to figure out what overall performance looks like. And if you can't even cover that baseline, how do you tie this to actual ROI, conversions, ROAS, right? And that's where, you know, we really come in. The final thing I'll mention here as the fourth challenge is that if your media buying is real-time and automated, shouldn't your reporting and your analytics be as well? Because now, you know, I think somebody earlier mentioned that you don't have to be data-driven, but you should be data-informed. Well, if you don't know how your campaigns are performing now, are you informed with every single moment that you have? Probably not, right? And so I think it's the culmination of all of these things that's given us the I'll say the notoriety of a black box, right, within programmatic. But, you know, hopefully here today I can shed a little bit of light on how Datorama and overall all of Salesforce really thinks that we can shed some more light into this box and hopefully break that down. And that starts with something called marketing intelligence. And so for those of you who haven't heard that term before, it's our way of thinking about business intelligence built specifically for the media and the ad tech industry, right? And really what it means to be able to implement a marketing intelligence solution or a marketer intelligence approach is by taking into account three different things, right? Complete data ownership, meaning to say owning all of the data that exists around your organization so that you're really doing what's best for not just the campaign, but for your clients, right? And overall, that's hopefully creating more cross-sell and upsell and more client retention, customer lifetime value. Alignment on KPIs. Again, it's not always just about the click-through rates and the impressions. You know, 40% click-through rate is all good and great, but if there's no ROAS behind it, then you're not really going there. The trick is finding the right KPIs to reverse engineer from that. And then finally, real-time insight, right? So making sure that, you know, with the velocity that's happening within your media buying, you're able to figure out where exactly all of that is going. And for a lack of better words, you're putting lazy marketing dollars back to work. So data ownership, what does this mean? If you're like many other programmatic teams, you probably have data living between your ad server. If you're on the vendor side, your client's ad servers, potentially a DMP for your audience targeting, 3 different viewability vendors depending on who your client wants to use. You're also thinking about your media planning systems, right? Where all of your budgets are. You're thinking about your CRM, where your IOs are living. You're thinking about the multiple different channels that you're actually buying on, and then you're thinking about all the different platforms underneath those channels, right? Chances are most of this is disconnected, right? Unless you already have implemented a way to bring it all together. And in order to really own your data, you need to be able to realize the end deliverables of having at least dashboards and reporting for every single team. Most people start their day by figuring out where exactly their business is running, their hire or fire KPIs, as I like to call them. And that further informs what you should be prioritizing with your day, right? Insights and analytics. There's a really big difference between observations of a campaign, looking at a chart and thinking, okay, well, this campaign's performed like this, and summarizing that, versus talking about how you actually got there, why you chose to target this audience, why this was the best creative for the specific placement, and where additional audiences might be able to be targeted. And then finally, goals, alerts, and activations, right? just a quick story. I used to be a buyer myself, and the reality was that I had about 10 different tabs open at any given point, looking at all of the different platforms that I was buying on, and refreshing the pages, really. But if we had something like goal tracking or an alert notification system, or even just activations to programmatically pause campaigns, swap out creatives, that would probably just make every single dollar perform that much better. And that's what we're really kind of proposing here, right? By implementing some sort of framework that ties together how all of these different systems should be talking to each other across all their different granularities, whether that's the campaign names or the deal IDs or the transaction IDs or the audiences, right? Once you're able to bring all of that together, you're finally able to serve out every single team on how they should be operating. You're creating better insights, and then ultimately you're not letting any minutes go to waste because you're actually optimizing as quickly as that data is coming in. Secondly, aligning KPIs to optimize your programmatic strategy. So multiple people here will have their own kind of approaches on what that might mean. People have their own rules on what constitutes healthy bids versus unhealthy bids. Everybody wants to be able to make sure that you're winning the bids where you're going to be in front of the most valuable audiences, right? But it's really, really important to make sure that for every single client that you support or for yourselves, you're staying true to ultimately what a campaign's objective should be, and then identifying the right KPIs that go over there. Some people are fans of viewability, right? Well, it's difficult sometimes to map viewability to all the different campaigns that you might be running, or even for a single campaign running across multiple channels. How do you do that, right? It starts with being able to understand how everything links together as well. And then ultimately, once you figure out your conversion metric that's going to really drive that, you start to figure out which KPIs are most aligned to that, so that you can make that happen. And then finally, real-time insight, right? So what does real-time insight really mean? Well, if you have multiple bids coming in through your programmatic channels all the time, and you want to be able to flag campaigns that aren't running where they should be, or aren't being targeted where they should be, it's important to hop on that right away so that you're not overspending your dollars where they don't need to be spent, right? And so some people think about this as a dashboard, but to my point earlier, I think alerts and notifications and goal tracking are really kind of important for that. So quick shameless plug, that's what we do, right? So if you're not familiar with Datorama, we essentially bring all of your different platforms together. Doesn't matter if there's an API or not. As long as you have access to that platform, we have ways to integrate that. We have pre-built data models, machine learning. And so the theory is, give us your ad servers, give us your multiple different DSPs, your display platforms, whatever viewability vendors you want, give us your CRM and your media planning system, and now you'll have a single view of where all of your opportunities are coming from, all of your booked budgets or your booked impressions versus what's actualized, and then finally what ultimately should be billable based off of viewability, right, or whatever kind of thresholds you guys have there. On top of that, we introduce AI. So I always like to throw out there, maybe throwing myself under the bus, AI is a little bit of a buzzword, right? What does that even mean? The end of the world? I don't know, that's what Elon Musk says. But to put it into application, there's very real applications for AI within our space, right? For example, the fact that there's multiple different ways you can test out your media between the campaign level, the audience, the placements, the creatives, right? Whatever it is. Most people don't have the time to figure out which combinations are the best performing. People will often write out, a very specific audience that just doesn't perform well for a single campaign or a single creative. But when you put these two things together, sometimes they outperform. That's something that AI is really good at. Humans just don't have the time to do that. We have finite time, really. But AI is always running, right? And you can actually set an AI for that. Reporting in real time, obviously making sure that you guys are able to flag campaigns as they actually come in whenever they're underperforming, under pacing maybe. And then finally, collaboration and action, right? So that everybody can work together in one place. So what happens when you bring everything together, right? So what we've seen is essentially a 20 to 30% performance uplift for programmatic, depending on how you define your KPIs. Ultimately, speed, right, as well. If all of your reporting is being done manually, by the way, if you lived my life before where I had 10 different tabs open for all my different DSPs, I was pulling all of these things together into Excel, throwing it to somebody else more technically proficient than me to create some sort of wrap report, and then figuring out what to do from there. If that's your reality, well, think about all of that being automated. And then finally, growth, right? Now that we actually have a full view of what is happening top of funnel, can we attribute this to actual lead generation happening on our website? Can we attribute this to different products actually being sold, right? And can we actually come back to our clients and talk about what ultimately is going to drive more and more conversions, where dollars really should be spent? So I'll quickly just share two different clients that had done this with us, one on the brand side and one on the agency side. Pernod Ricard is one company you guys probably are all familiar with by now that actually realized the power of programmatic very early on, and they decided to take ownership of their data right from the get-go. And so what they did was essentially having to use 5 different DSPs, they wanted to make sure that they were optimizing their traffic across the best ones where it made the most sense, and specifically the ones that had, the kind of the best audiences there. And so they integrated everything together, linked that back with their CRM, also with their order management system, and now everything's delivering in full. A lot of the added value that typically happens when you over-deliver is kind of minimized there, and a lot of the insights that they're giving out now are incredibly driven. All of their client kind of conversations are talking about what more they could be doing, new audiences to target, what the result could be if you increase media budgets. And then on the agency side, we work with a ton of really great agencies. DWA is one example of an agency that really knows how to use programmatic. They also have a lot of control over how they actually run their campaigns, but what they don't have control over are the vendors that their clients are using, right? Knowing that every single client can use their own viewability vendor, their own content management system, their own channels, right? A lot of non-standardization. That's hard. And when you think about an agency business, it's hard to scale. And so what they did was they united pretty much all their data sources from their first to the third-party data into us, as well as their display, their social, their programmatic, search, web analytics, CRM, email. So overall, for a single campaign that's running across multiple different channels, they now can easily see how overall spend and KPI goals are looking like in real time. But then that also allows them to actually make the case to get first-party data with their own clients, right? And to really be an analytics advisor, the agency of other agencies, if you will. And so they've seen really great results in terms of cutting down all of their manual reporting. And then ultimately, I think the lift shows here they gained about 2,000 hours per year. But really, the thing you should be thinking about is if you had all of that time back, what would you do with it, right? And so that's pretty much all I have for you today. If you have any more questions around marketing intelligence, please feel free to find me. I also have one of my colleagues in the back, Brian over there. Happy to talk about data analytics, data cleansing, whatever. That's what we do all day. So thank you for the time. Enjoy your lunch.